Welcome to Compliance Clips, where our goal is expertise shared, excellence shaped. At Compliance Clips, we bring a diverse range of industry experts to share their insights and help develop our listeners' industry knowledge. Today is our second video featuring Kerri Wirachowsky of the CVSA. Over the past 7 years, Kerri has served as the Director of Inspection Programs at the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, overseeing transformative changes in her role. In this video, we explore the evolution of training for CVSA roadside officers and members of the transportation industry during this period. With over 3 decades of experience as a roadside inspector and a track record of receiving numerous awards for excellence in training and leadership, Kerri brings an unparalleled understanding of the industry's challenges and the role of enforcement officers. Please join us as we uncover how her expertise and unwavering dedication continue to shape the landscape of commercial vehicle safety education and standards, ultimately benefiting all of us and contributing to the shared goal of making our roads safer for every user.
Like one of the first things that I saw when I started my job was I went to a collision with one of my training officers, and a brake drum had come out from under a truck and decapitated a woman and melted into the back of the car. That's not something you forget in your lifetime. And the thing is, every single time I found a broken brake drum, in my mind, I'd go save the life. But nobody knows.
Right.
Nobody knows. And the only ones they know about, and Ontario is the prime example, the wheel separations that happened back in the 90s, like when those came off, it's like, oh, regulate. Well, sometimes it's not regulate because we already have the regulations. It's training those drivers to do better trip inspections. It's training the industry to know what to look for to prevent that from ever happening, because I'd be pretty lucky to see every truck on the highway in my career, because I didn't. But a driver does, right?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of that too. And a lot of when I worked for the Ontario government, I loved going out and doing exactly what I'm doing right now, talking to industry and talking to drivers, because if you know what you're doing, you actually don't need the enforcement people that much.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. It's because again, we're looking at these drivers. They're professional drivers. They're trained to a specific standard because they have to operate at a higher level than the public does.
Yeah.
But they're responsible not only for their own safety and to get home safely at night, but the public as well. And
I empathize with them because there's a lot to know. Like it's just because you can drive a truck doesn't mean you can inspect it, and doesn't mean you know how to deal with your ELD and all those other things that they have to learn, right? So it's an ongoing process because it never ends. I mean, the latest conversation I've had with motor carriers is ADAS, like all this, driver assistance systems. They're all great, but you got to train your drivers on how they operate, because, they can be detrimental to a driver if he doesn't know why they engage and how to disengage them and everything else. So every single day when something comes out new on a truck, ELDs is no different. I mean, you can't just throw the thing in a truck and then now the driver's responsible to be able to transfer his rods to an inspector and everything else. Well, if you don't train him, now that poor guy's sitting on the side of the road, unfortunately, potentially receiving violations and at least frustration from an inspector because you didn't learn the one and only ELD you needed to use. Whereas inspectors are never going to know how to use 600 different ELDs. A driver just needs to know how to use one.
Right. Yes, exactly. Well, it was funny because in talking with a client here just recently, we talked about, the driver will go through school, learn how to operate that vehicle, but they only learn how to operate the vehicle that they trained on. When they turn around and come to work for your company, they didn't drive a brand new Cascadia Freightliner, or that new Peterbilt 389. They weren't operating that. So now you need to take the time to show them where all the buttons are, where everything is. It's different. And
there are lack of buttons, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. So true.
There are no buttons.
Yeah. The wiper switch is different from the signal switch now. And then, as you say, ADAS in there, all this new technology, lane avoidance, and stuff along this line. All that stuff. We have it in our cars. A lot of the newer cars are coming out with it, but driving a Toyota and a Freightliner there are some similarities, but a lot of differences, and we got to make sure that these people know those differences.
Right. Right.
So one of the things you'd mentioned was lots of training by all means. So with CVSA, knowing it's an association and it works with law enforcement North American wide, how does that work with roadside officers? I know there's a lot of state troopers that are CVSA. You've got DOT officers, and here in Canada, you got your MTO, your provincial, and also police. A lot of police are CVSA. So how does that process work? How do you go about getting that training into place for those different ministries?
So over the last 7 years since I've been at CVSA, we've gone a long way in trying to get the message out to those inspectors, because basically what we do is when we develop something, there is a lead agency contact for every state and province and territory in our membership. So there is a lead agency contact in Ontario, for instance. So everything that we send out goes to that lead agency contact, and we rely on that lead agency contact person to disseminate that information out to all the certified officers. So the lead agency contact in Ontario, for example, is the Ministry of Transportation, but they are responsible and have memorandums of understanding with all of those police departments that you were talking about. So the police departments around Ontario that have a couple certified people plus the OPP, all those people have MOUs with the MTO. And they go to all the same training as the MTO people would go to for refresher training, et cetera.
Right.
And then the other thing that we've done is, and we did a lot of this through COVID, I won't lie, because we couldn't get out and talk to anybody. So for 18 months, we really started to build out our learning management system. So we have a lot of online training now. And we have come to the conclusion, there's a lot of inspectors and people out there that are a lot younger than myself. And we have concluded that they like to watch things rather than read things. So when we issue an inspection bulletin, or we update an operational policy, or we do anything in relation to inspections, we build out little inspection courses. They may only be 5-7 minutes long, but at the end, there's a little quiz. They get a certificate that they took it. That way their agency can know that they took it, because they get a certificate at the end, so they can give it to their boss, whatever. All the motor carrier industry can go in there and take them too, because my honest belief is the motor carrier industry needs to take the same training as the inspectors. You're the one operating the trucks. You're the one out there checking the trucks. So why shouldn't you know as much as the inspector on the side of the road? Because then you can have the same conversation, as opposed to me telling you how things are supposed to be. You already know how things are supposed to be. So knowledge is power, right? And it's all there for you. You just have to go get it, right? So I spend a lot of time dealing with our industry members. I mean, I will tell you, when I left Ontario, I felt like I was leaving 250 kids behind, which were the inspectors, because I was their go-to person. I was the lead agency contact for Ontario. So I would funnel all that information to them. And it was probably one of the hardest decisions I made leaving. But I went because I felt like I could make a bigger impact than just dealing with Ontario. I could deal with North America. And I will tell you, initially it wasn't really panning out, but 7 years later, with all the things that I've done with the industry, they are now the people that call me more.
Right. Sure.
Inspectors in some cases.
Yeah. So let's touch on the training for a second, because I'm quite curious about this. So as a CVSA inspector, do they have to do refresher training, calibration, we like to call it, or recalibration and stuff along that line?
Yes. So we have an operational policy. It's number 4, and it basically tells you how an inspector gets certified and how they maintain their certification. And if they lose their certification, how to get it back. So in order to get certified, an inspector has to take an 80-hour course, and they have to do 32 inspections with a certified inspector after the course is over. They have to attain 80% on the exams for both courses, and then they become certified. Then every year after that, they have to attend an in-service refresher, and they have to do a minimum of 32 inspections annually. If they don't do that, then they lose their certification, and they have to stay employed by a government entity. So sadly, I lost my certification the day I quit my government job, because I can't be certified and not work for a government agency. But so I work on all the in-service training for inspectors, and I put it on our website, and I do a webinar in like February telling them all the updates. And at minimum, that's what I would like every state, province, and territory to use. And then in a lot of cases, when I did in-service in Ontario, if we had, specific things that were going on in Ontario that I wanted to update them on, I would add that information into the in-service that was done throughout the province. And everybody has to attend.
Yep. Cool.
It's part of the certification.
Yeah. So I love the fact that it's 80 hours. 80 hours. That's 2 full weeks for most people at 40 hours a week. That's like a week and a half for the average truck driver. And what's interesting, 80 hours is a very big chunk of 103 and a half hours for the MELT training program. I don't see trucking schools providing 80 hours worth of inspection training.
No, they don't. So, I mean, that's the one thing that when I left the government, I thought we were going to get into state training, which we have just recently, but we didn't at the beginning. So I said, then I need to teach. That's what I do. That's what I always did. So I developed a course for the industry, which is basically the inspector course. And it's an 80-hour course. Wow. And I started it in 2017 in Utah. And then I started it in Canada 2 years ago, and I've had 4 courses out in Alberta. And you know what? I mean, you might think 40 hours is a long time for 1 week, but those industry people, I can't get them out of my face. It's like I can't give them enough information in 40 hours. Wow. I can't. And they need it, they want it, and I fill it, and I think they're better at what they do because of it. They understand it. They understand our policies. They'll say to me, now I get it. Now I understand it. Like the driver requirements, we're in hours of service for 2 days. Yep. And we're going through graph grids and going through sleeper burst splits. And so many motor carrier people will go, yeah, we don't use sleeper burst because we don't get it. I go, well, you're going to get it before you leave here because it's beneficial to get it. I mean, you're shooting yourself in the foot if you don't understand all the different things you can utilize within the hours of service regulations. Yes. And excluding yourself from sleeper burst split is a big penalty to the motor carrier because you can get yourself out of a lot of situations by legally using sleeper burst if you know what you're doing. Yep. Right? Yep. And especially in the United States, a lot of them don't because they just don't understand it. But they do by the time they leave that course. And they tell me that. They're like, oh, and the nice thing is, they often tell me now they appreciate inspectors and they appreciate the amount that inspectors actually have to learn and retain. And I said, and remember that when the inspector makes a mistake, because they're human beings and they make mistakes. But then I used to say the same thing to inspectors. You know what? Now that you know how hard this is, because, I mean, CVSA training was 2 weeks. They went to 9 weeks of training. And so during that 9 weeks, they're inundated with so much information and they're like confused. And they're like, man, this is hard. I go, yeah, remember that when you get that driver on the side of the road and the only thing wrong is that he forgot to sign his registration or something.